In this video, I am going to systematically break down all of the features of Prisma Calendar. This is going to serve as the official encyclopedia, showing everything from A to Z. First of all, what is Prisma Calendar? It's a schema-agnostic visualization layer that allows you to turn any Obsidian node with a date property into a first-class citizen on your own timeline. It's highly flexible. There are no rigid schemas or predefined fields. It's just your own data with your own rules and filters rendered exactly how you need it. This is not just a calendar, it's a way to see your entire vault through time. This plugin offers 4 dedicated views: calendar, timeline, Gantt, and Heatmap views, each built for a different way of thinking about time. At the time of the recording, this plugin is not yet accepted in the Obsidian community store, so the best way to install it is by using bread. To get the most up-to-date information on how to install the plugin, please visit the documentation page that's going to be linked below. After installing the plugin, the first thing you should do is select the directory where you're going to store your events, or if you have already existing directory that you want to turn into a visual timeline, write it here. After that, you can use either this ribbon icon here or the shortcut to open a calendar, and we are going to show you the calendar view here. Let's start off by creating a few events. So obviously you can turn a timed event into an all-day event and just interact with your nodes by dragging them over the calendar, expanding them. Next, by right-clicking on a node, you can view a context menu that can be managed here to basically configure what buttons you want to see here. You can also change the icons, colors, or naming. But the most important one is the button to edit the event, where we show all of the fields that this event has. Let's explain the fields. So if you look at the properties, the difference between a timed event and an all-day event is that, first of all-day event has the Boolean property set to true, but the second difference is that the start date property of timed events follow this format, and the all-day property follows this format with just date type, and this is date time type with also milliseconds. Another thing to note and see is that the events contain a Zettel ID suffix that is separated with a dash. And you can also see that each node gets a calendar title property, which basically contains the absolute path and then the name with the Zettel ID suffix stripped. The reason for this is that inside the calendar, you can create multiple events with the same name. So you can see here, and there won't be conflicts. By default, Obsidian doesn't allow the same file names in the same directory, which makes sense because it's a file system. So what we are doing is using Zettel IDs to ensure uniqueness. And then the calendar uses this calendar title property to display the name. And the reason why there is this property is that also you can use this in your own, for example, basis view or scripting logic. Because if you were to just view the tasks folder through Obsidian basis, you will see the Zettel IDs everywhere. But if you don't reference the file name, but instead use this calendar title property, you will actually see just timed event, which may be what you want. So when editing an event, first of all, there is the title property. Then, as we just showcased, there is the start date and end date for timed events and date for all day. You can also change the duration like this, and we are automatically going to adjust the end date for you. The next field is the recurring event field, which when toggled on is going to spawn recurring events instances. The way this plugin works is that recurring events are isolated nodes that are connected through a Frontmatter property. And I'm going to get to it in a second. Then we support categories. The way categories work is that the plugin indexes a category property that you specify here. And so at the start, when you create a new vault, there won't be any categories, but once you start using them, they're going to get assigned, and now they will be suggested here, and you can search through them. So this way, you don't have to type the same category, you can just select it here. So as you start using this plugin over time, you will build your own category taxonomy. And categories have a dedicated setting here, which gives you statistics around them, the ability to change colors for specific categories, and I'll talk about it later. We also support prerequisites, which you can assign here, which allows you to use them in the Gantt view and also to render connections between them. We are going to get to it as well. Then participants, which means people participating in the event, you can either use string or a Obsidian link. Location of the event, then an icon property, which can be an emoji or text, and then the plugin is going to render this icon property at the top right corner for each event. So you can customize your calendar so that it looks nicer. Break minutes, break property is used inside statistics. So Prisma calendar shows the statistics of how you spend your time. So for example, here you can see that we have spent 2.5 hours for this event, and the break property is just used to subtract minutes from the statistics. So what is that going to do is that now it's going to be rendered as just 2 hours instead of 2.5. So if you didn't actually spend 2.5 hours on this event, but only 2 hours, you can use break property. It's just a convenient way. You could technically split the event into 2 events and create a half-an-hour gap. So then we have the mark property as done, which is just an abstraction that you can configure here. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, everything here is configurable. So every property is configurable. So if you have an existing workflow and your vault with folder and you have your timed properties named differently, you can just configure it here and it's going to be adjusted. But back to the status property here. So you can configure whatever you want here, and then you can configure done and not done values. So if you are using Kanban or any workflow, you can just configure whatever value you want to put there, and then you can just mark it as done here. So you can see here, status is not even here right now, but when we status is going to be set to done. And then the skip property, which allows you to hide the event from the calendar. So if you want the node to still exist, but you want to hide it from the calendar view, you can skip it. It's going to be showcased here, so you can unskip it back. So if you don't want to see the event anymore, or you were planning something but you are going to skip it, you don't want it to pollute your calendar view, you can just skip it. Then we also support displaying custom properties here that you configure in the settings and all of the other properties. So you can use this model to also add properties like this. The last property is minutes before, notify minutes before, which basically you can specify how many minutes before this event you should be notified by the plugin. So for example, if I set 5 minutes here and I make it happen, I'm going to get a notification. And this is just a override of the default value. So basically inside settings, you have notifications. So you can first of all enable them, and you can configure default notifications times for both timed events and all day events. So you can specify if it's empty, it means there is no default. So, but if I were to set 5 here, I wouldn't need to specify anything here. And if I wanted to override it, I could say, for example, 50 or 30, and it's going to take priority. The same thing applies for all day events, but it's notified days before with the same default value here. So it's specific for timed events and for all day events. Now, we already explained all of these properties. Now, there is sorting normalization strategy, which sounds very technical, but what this does, and I recommend using this, as it's written here. So you can see here, we have added this sort date property. And also here. So what's the point of sort date property is to have a unified property name that you can sort all of your events by. So if you are using, for example, Obsidian Basis or Data View or any plugin, the problem with all the events is that they use date property and timed events use these two properties. But when you use this strategy, we are going to unify and take the start date and put it here, also the date, with the same formatting. So as you can see, it's consistent. So now you can sort your events consistently everywhere. And this is configurable. The title property allows you to override the file name. Then the calendar title property, as we already explained, it basically just allows you to see your event without the Zettel ID. We can also write to the Zettel ID of the event into a property if you configure it. Then there was the skip property. Recurring events properties. The rule property specifies the type, so daily, weekly, or monthly. And for weekly or bi-weekly, you can specify particular days. I'm going to show it in a second. So basically, for weekly, you can specify that I want this event for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Next, rule ID property is used by the plugin. It's an internal property that allows the plugin to track and connect events to be part of a recurring event series. So when you have the source recurring event that generates future event instances, the RO ID is what connects them so that when the plugin starts, it knows which events are bound together under one recurring event series. The source property is what every event that's generated from some recurring event source has, and it basically links to it. I'm going to show it. It will generate 2. Normally, it will generate only 1. Future instance count property is what allows you to basically override the default value of how many instances into the future the plugin should generate. The default is 2, and you can configure the default to apply to all, and this is just a override, basically override property, similar to notifications. Generate past events. When you have a source recurring event in the past, by default we only generate events into the future. So we start from the present into the future. But if you set the past event property to true, we are going to generate all of the events from the point when the source event exists up till now as well. So if you were to create a daily event 1 year from now, set it as recurring property, by default we would generate only 2 events here and here, for example. But if you set this to true, we are going to generate 365 events up till now, plus the extra 2. The status property was already explained, so this is just a custom property where you can mark events as done. And you can set the done value and not done value. So once the event is already done, the plugin detects it, and you can mark it as undone. Then back done. And it's going to be set, it's going to use the not done value. So this is just a convenient way to mark nodes with your own custom workflow. So you should override this to whatever suits you. And there's also custom done and custom undone properties, and these are advanced. And I use these because this allows you to basically have 2 separate options for marking events as done. Because the plugin marks events as done periodically when you enable the option to mark past events as done here. So if you want to isolate that, basically marking events as done uses this value. And also the button which I have shown to mark events as done and undone uses this value. But you can basically override it so that this button will use this value instead. So I use this personally because this allows me to have basically 2 different configurations where if the plugin marks past events as done, which is something I want, it uses this value. And when I mark events manually as done, it uses this value instead. So it's more flexible for me, and I build filters around this so that it works for me. It's better. And this accepts basically key and value. So it's going to hello world is going to set the hello property to world. And back here it's going to be hello node world. So it's going to set it to hello to node world. Similar to this. And this is advanced use case. Category property, we already went through it. Location, participants, break icon, prerequisite. And these are also minutes before and days before. The already notified property, when the plugin triggers a notification, it marks the events as done. Here, set this to true, so that when you restart Obsidian, you're not going to get notified again. So this is just a way to configure that. Now let's show recurring events in action. When you select this checkbox, first of all, you can specify the type. So, for example, here, when we select weekly or bi-weekly, we can specify the specific days of the week. So by default, weekly will generate the event every week on the day where the original event was defined, but you can specify it to be on specific days, and this is going to repeat itself. Also custom intervals. So the future instance count, you can override how many events into the future to generate and past events. So let's create it. So the terminology here is this event is the source event from which all of the new events are going to be generated. So this is source event, these are physical events, and these are virtual events. So virtual events are going to go indefinitely, and you cannot do anything with them, and they are not actual nodes. But you can basically go to source to see the original node that is generating them, and you can see them in the series here. So they are served as just a future guiding point of how is it going to look like when these nodes are going to be generated, but they don't exist yet, because otherwise you would pollute your entire vault with millions of nodes, because this is going to go indefinitely. So that's why this is only virtual. But it's good to see how vault is going to look like in the future. So these are the physical events. So this is the source event. As you can see here, we specify the pattern, and then the plugin assigns an URL ID, which all of the other nodes are going to share. So we use the same URL ID here. And this is how the plugin identifies that these events are part of the same series. So then we also have the source property, which is pointing to the original node that generated them. And we also specify recurring instance date, which basically means on what date the event was generated. We also add this value into the name here. So we basically take the name of the recurring event, add the instance date, and then Zettel ID. This recurring instance date is also showcased in the event name here. And then we also include a hash of the URL ID, which is the same for all of the events, as you can see. And this is as a defense mechanism to prevent generation of duplicate files. So we are not using Zettel ID here, we are using hashing mechanisms. The recurring events are highly flexible. And so first of all, each event is a separate node, so you can write whatever custom context you want here, so custom nodes. But also, so we set this recurring instance date here. But technically, if you are generating, for example, weekly nodes, it doesn't really make sense with daily. But if we are generating weekly, we can move this node around and even change the name. And the plugin doesn't really care, because the URL ID instance date, the recurring instance date is going to be set to the original value. So the plugin knows that, okay, I have generated already this event for this day. So if you move it around, the plugin will also detect that and rename it. But it doesn't really care. You can place it here, you can change the time, you can do whatever you want with the event. We have already generated it for you because you specified that you want it once a week, and we know based on this date that it was generated for this week. So also, when you move the source event, we are going to also adjust the time events for all of the others. So when I change this, we are going to adjust the times for all of the events that have the same start and end time as the original one. So if I moved here, this one here, and now I adjust it, this one is not going to get adjusted because it's different. Now let's show recurring events in action so you can see how it works precisely and explaining the extra parameters. So by default, we use the default value of 2, but if I specify the future instances count to, for example, 5, you can see that we have generated 5 events into the future. Also, so when I delete a recurring event, you will get prompted so that you can remove all of the associated events as well. You can also disable recurring event, and then you can also choose to delete the associated events or not. And what the disabling means is that we are not going to generate any future instances. And actually, what disabling does is that it makes the skip property set to true for a recurring source event. So the source event is skipped, so it's set to true, and it's here flagged as being disabled. But the existing events will be retained if you don't delete them. And you can enable the event back at any time, and it's just going to start generating events into the future. Unless it has the generate past event instance is set to true. Let's also show the custom weekly interval. So first of all, when we set a weekly, without specifying any of the days of the week, it's just going to generate it at the same day and time as the original one. But if we use the custom weekly, and I set it to, for example, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, it's going to generate the events not at Sunday where the original event originated, but on these days. It's also the option custom interval. So for example, let's do 3 days here. So that works as well. And also, so when we create a recurring event, by default, it's only generated into the future. But if we set this generate past events, it's going to generate all of the events from the date the source recurring event was created up till now as well. So if you want past history and you don't have it yet, you can use this option. So as we already said, recurring events are connected through arrow ID property. And we offer statistics here so you can see and work with it. So when you click at any of the physical events, first of all, let's go through virtual. So virtual events only offer the option to enlarge, which is going to show the original source recurring event. Also the option to go to source, which is going to highlight and navigate to the original event that generated it. And then the option to edit it directly here, which is a convenient way. The option to disable it and to view the event groups. So event groups is going to show you the statistics of this recurring event. So we can see that we generated 2 events here. We are going to get all of the statistics of the also past. So we by default hide past events. We also track how many events you have skipped. So you can use this for habit tracking, where you will create a, for example, because this works also for all day events, which I didn't really show. So you can create a habit to read, for example, and you can just set it here. So you can track it this way. And if you don't do it, you can skip it here. And when you skip it, you can see the statistics of, it doesn't show completed yet because it aggregates it only once it happens in one. So it has to be in the past for it to be shown. but you're going to get statistics. So for example, let's actually move this into the past and generate past instances. So you can see that we have completed one. If I skip it, we have not completed any. So it only shows the past. And so you can track your habits, literally to see how often do you complete your events. And so inside the events group here, you can see the table view of all of the events, list and cards view, which is just Obsidian basis. Then also the timeline view of your habit, which is useful, and also Heatmap View, which I'm going to show you in a second. And also by name. So basically, every event has a name. So we track the series, and the series are tracked based on the naming. So all of the nodes that share the same name. So right now, we have this recurring series, but also by name. And if I created a new node here, daily, it's going to be part of the same, not recurring series, but by name. So you can see here it is. So it's sorted and here it's included. So we track, and it offers the same kind of statistics here. So as you can see, this is the daily node we just created, and the same thing. So in this table, we color it based on the color of the recurring event. Then we show the statistics here. You can search through it, you will see them all here, and then these 5 views. And you can also see and work with the recurring events through this module here, where you will see the list of all of your recurring events. You can search through it. You can filter based on types. And you can manage this. You can set the category for the recurring event through here. You can navigate to see the node, and you can disable it from here as well. So if I disable reading, we are no longer going to show the virtual instances. And then we can filter based on disabled, and also we can choose how we are going to sort it. So the physical instances have the same options as the virtual ones, but they also have the, you can, when you click duplicate over a physical instance, it's going to generate an instance without the recurring events properties assigned to it. So it's going to be a standalone file that's not going to be part of the recurring event series. However, it can still be tracked inside the by name tracking. As you can see here. Now let's talk about the rest of the buttons. So enlarge, then we have preview, which just triggers the Obsidian preview, and you can also do this by hovering over the node and holding CTRL, and then you can basically write directly here, and it's just basic Obsidian hover functionality. So we already went through edit event, then we have the options to assign categories, which is just a shortcut, and also for prerequisites. So it's just a convenient value, so you don't have to use the edit event and assign it here. It's the same thing if you do it here. So you can see same thing for prerequisite. Then events duplication. So for recurring events, it strips it, and for normal events, it just duplicates the event. Then we have the move by option, which just moves the event quickly. If you want to quickly manipulate an event, then marking done as undone. We already showed that. So it basically sets the done property to the value we configured. Yeah, so in this case, we are using the override option here of hello world, but otherwise it would have sent the status to done. But in this case, it has set the hello to world. So then the option to move it to next week, and actually let's delete this series and so we can move it to the next week. We can move it to the previous week. And we can also clone it to next week and clone it to the previous week. Then we have also the options to fill the end time from current time, which is just going to set it here, or for example, to fill the start time from the current time. So these are just convenient way. Again, you can do this also here with now buttons. And this is used for time tracking. If you are basically tracking your time with the stopwatch functionality, mostly time tracking here, I will show it later. And we have also the options to fill start time from previous event. So if this is the previous event, you can fill the start time from it. And again, this can be also done in the buttons here. And same thing for next event. So we can fill the end time from it. So this is if you want to basically have your calendar fully filled with actual reality of how it looks. So this just makes it easier to assign precise boundaries between events and ensures that your calendar is going to be fully filled. Then the events deletion, the skipping, option to open the file and also to open the file in a new window here. And then there is the option to trigger stopwatch. So the way stopwatch works is when you trigger it like this, what's going to happen is minimize model. So the first thing that's going to be done is that the start date is going to be set to now. And it's going to trigger time tracking. Now the plugin is tracking how you're spending your time. So there is a total time and total break time. So you are tracking your sessions. You can also take breaks, and we are going to be basically calculating your break splits. Then you can resume. And we are going to basically write the break value here. So it's 6 seconds, which is basically 1/10 of a minute. And once you are done, let's wait for a minute here. And so once you're done, it's going to set the end date to the current now value. So I finish it. I can resume it here. And when I save it, so this node, now you basically have tracked it precisely how you spend your time. So if you use this with discipline, you can basically track your entire day with this. Also, there is the option where if you have it already set up, and for example, you are restarting Obsidian, you can just press the option to continue. And this is just going to continue the tracking of the event. And what does it mean? So when we trigger a stopwatch, we mentioned that start date gets set to now, but the other thing is that we are going to track this event inside what we call restore minimized event model. So the model gets minimized and it's being still used. So on the background, the stopwatch feature is still being tracked. So the clock is ticking. So clock is ticking and you can just reopen it. So I'm going to write here that, let's show another example. So maybe I will have here set up that I'm going to work in Obsidian. I'm going to write something. So I trigger a stopwatch here. So another thing that has happened was we were tracking the new event in the minimized model. So when we trigger a stopwatch feature, the previous one that was being tracked is going to be saved, its end date is going to be set to now, and it's done. And so basically we continue right back where the other finished. So you can basically create to-do checkbox here with like send mail. Literally you can have all of your tasks here set up in the all-day header. And so you are now working in Obsidian, you're writing something, and then once you are done, you can just trigger the next task here. This is going to be set to now, and you're just going to continue with the next one. And now send mail is being tracked. So you can track your usage with this. And that's what I'm doing personally. Next, I'm going to showcase batch select and working with events in a batch. So we already went through all of these options, and when you press the batch select, which is configurable with a hotkey, you can basically select multiple events and then trigger changes with batch. So for example, skip, I'm going to skip all of these events. So this allows you to work with multiple events at the same time. You can also select all or clear it. And when while they are selected, you're going to render a model of all the currently selected events here as well. So you can search through it and unselect them manually here as well if you want to. So another thing is that, if you can see here, we have this is also available as a hotkey, undo and redo. So every action in Prisma calendar is undoable and also redoable. And this applies to both batch options as well as single event options. And batch options are basically encapsulated and undone as one operation, which makes sense. So here, we can undo this and redo it again. Let's show more batch options first. So moving by, for example, 1 hour. I'm going to move these two events by 1 hour. You can undo it, redo it again. Next, there is also the option to basically apply Frontmatter changes over multiple events. So if I write here, for example, new value, and see that they have been assigned the new value property here. Then we have the option to move them to the next week. You can add them back, move to the previous week, and add them back. Also to open them. So skipping them, we already showed that. And then also deletion, which can also be undone and redoed. And the buttons that are going to be showcased here can be configured inside settings. If you go to the configuration, we have the batch selection buttons. So as you can see, we also support duplicate and marking events as done as or undone, assigning categories, cloning next and previous week, and moving, opening or skipping, for example. So if I replace them like this, as you can see now we have the duplicate. Marking them as done, which in my configuration here marks them done by assigning the archive property to true, so they disappear because I'm basically applying global filters. That's my workflow. And so undone, and for example also categories, which we already have here, but if you select events that have the same categories, we are going to detect it, so we are going to pre-show it. So I can, for example, remove category like this. Okay, so that's the batch selection buttons. And then we also have the toolbar buttons here. So the first one is to just navigate to today. There is also the button to navigate to now, which is going to basically navigate and show you the timeline of the current time. You can also change the zoom logic by clicking here or by just scrolling with the middle mouse button, so you can unzoom and zoom in. The next button is, first of all, there is a search button here, so you can search, and this just matches the if the string or the text here includes the event's name. So I can write either work or day here, it's going to match it. And when we match something, we also show the filtered events button here, so which can also be searched through. So we basically show all the events that are being filtered out. So events can be either filtered out or skipped. And these are two separate things, because when event is skipped, it's because its property skip is set to true. And if events are filtered out, it means that you are applying either this filtering or searching here that filters them out. So we have shown search, and the next is filtering. So search works with the events names, and filtering works over the events properties, Frontmatter properties. So for example, if I write here category includes work, we're only going to show events that have the category work. We can also target, for example, the new value property we set. So if you just write new, it means that the property has to exist. And then this is JavaScript. So if I write something like this, you can see that it works, because it basically applies the equality operation with JavaScript. So this is the filtering button, this is the search button, and we also have filter presets, which basically applies custom presets that you can configure here. And so you can write whatever you want here, and it's just basically pre-configuration of the filtering of the presets. So you don't have to type the category includes work or health again. You can also clear it and then apply it. So this is just a convenient way to save presets that you use. So you can have different ways of looking at the calendar. So you can remove distractions. If you right now have to see and detect just some particular events with certain properties values, that's why it's there. So all of these buttons can be configured to be hidden here. So you can basically remove any buttons that you don't want to see. So we will just hide them for you. And mobile gets a separate option, because on mobile you have limited UI. So this is something you may use more. So on mobile, you may want to hide more options compared to the desktop, because we have less space. So if you are not really using filtering, for example, on the mobile, I would remove them so that you have more space there. So that's why it's there. So how the calendar looks can be configured through the settings as well. And there's a lot of them, but most of these I would leave as they are, unless you have some specific use cases. But since the selling point of this calendar is that it's fully flexible and configurable, you can change literally anything. So that's why it's there, but for normal uses, you can leave everything as is. So maybe default view and default mobile view. Then whether you want to hide weekends and whether you want to skip underscore properties. And this means skipping underscore properties here. And in all of the showcases, so for example, also here. Then whether you want to see this current time indicator, which is this red line here. Next, there is the option to highlight upcoming events, which you can see right here, which basically highlights the next event that you are about to do. And this also highlights multiple events when they are overshadowing each other. Then there is the option to make the lines here thicker so that they are more visible. You can also change the coloring of the cells here by using a different color if you want to. So there is basically off, which is the default value. Then you can choose to use your own color. And there is also month boundary, which means that you can color the cells differently based on whether a new month is about to begin. So as the name implies here, on the month boundaries, you can choose different colors for the even month and odd months. So then there is the option to show duration and event title, which is just whether you want to show the duration here in the calendar. Then whether you want to have the header sticky on scrolling, so like this, whether this should follow you. Also with the toolbar. The next option is all-day events height, which is useful if you have a lot of all-day events and you have configured a lot of display properties, which display properties are, for example, the category here, or your all-day events have long names. So, because by default, we will show everything. So you can basically specify the height here so that the events don't take up more height than that. So, because otherwise, all the events could grow very large and they could potentially reach like somewhere here. So they would take up a lot of height of the entire calendar view. So that's why this configuration is there. And first day of the week, or changing the start hour, for example. Then also the end hour, the slot duration and snap duration. Then there is the option to drag edge scroll delay, which means that you're basically able to drag an event, not just here, but you can also drag it to a different week by hovering over the edge. And the millisecond is just a configuration of how long do you have to be there for it to trigger. So if you want it to be very sensitive, it's a matter of personal preference where you can adjust the sensitivity, because maybe for some people, they would prefer it to be very low, where it would be very sensitive and you just hover it here and it immediately triggers. And some people prefer it to be much more longer so that they have to intentionally go and hover there for a longer time for it to trigger. You can configure all of the zoom levels and display density. Then events overlapping. So by default, you can stack events like this and you can configure how many events you can stack before the plus more button is going to be shown here. So this is for timed events. And there is also the option for all-day events, which is specific for desktop but also mobile, because maybe for mobile you want it to be a lower value so that it takes up less height. So that's why there are specific options for this configuration for desktop and mobile. So right, for example, by default it's 2. If we change, for example, to 3 and create new event, you can see 3 is the maximum. Then there is also the option, let me first delete this. So in monthly view, we can show you color dots, which is useful if you have a lot of events and you are using coloring heavily, which we didn't really get to colors yet fully, but you will basically see color dots representing every color present in this day view. Because for example here, if I had, for example, 20 events here, I would use a lot of all-day events or timed events. I have my events really split into small granularity detail. So for example, each event takes only 15 minutes. I would have a lot of events, but still I want to see from a high level point of view, like what categories or what rules and colors I'm using there. So I can just see, okay, so because this is basically your own taxonomy. So this color is going to mean something else for you compared to someone else. So this is, you're going to attach meaning to the colors, and then you can spot it at a glance. You can also change the color of the text of the events here if you want to, and then there's the option to change the alternative event text color, which means that we use a smart detection that if the event text color is the same color as the background, we will use this alternative here. So let me show it here, for example. So you can see I have just changed it to white. So the text color was white and now the background is white. So we are using the alternative, which is black. And we can change the alternative here as well. Then you can also disable capacity tracking, which capacity tracking is this button right here, which basically shows you how many hours are your timed events taking up and how much potentially they could take up. So as you can see, it shows the bounds here. So it basically detects the earliest event across your entire week. So it's 8 a.m. here, and your latest event. So it's here stretching. And then it basically calculates those bounds times 7 for the total amount of hours you have this week. And then it calculates how many hours are your timed events taking up currently. So, and then it renders this bar with percentages and also with displays remaining. And this can be also seen, for example, here for weekly or monthly statistics as well. So you can see the bound of how you're spending your time. The last setting regarding the calendar here is the display properties, which can configure which properties do you want to see here. And it's specific for timed events, all-day events, properties inside Heatmap, and untracked events. So as you can see here, if I were to, for example, remove all of these for the all-day events, it would no longer show categories here. So you can configure whatever properties you are using personally over your nodes. So for example, we can also start showing status here. You can see. And this ties back to the all-day events height configuration. So if I configure to show here 10 properties and my events have all of these properties, they're all going to be rendered. So you can limit the height with the option. And then it's going to just overflow so you can scroll and see it all. Okay, so untracked events. Untracked events are basically events that are not all-day events or timed events. So there are any nodes inside the folder you configure Prisma Calendar to look into, so tasks, that don't have start date, end date, or date properties configured. So they cannot be showcased in the calendar view here because they don't have time properties. But Prisma still tracks them for you inside this untracked events dropdown. So let's look at these events. We also show their coloring here and the display properties as well. So we can show that, for example, here, if I add hello, needs to be refreshed. Yeah, so as you can see, we show hello property here. So you can configure what you want to see also inside this dropdown. That's what this configuration is for. Now back to the untracked events. So let's compare a normal event to an untracked event. So they can include the properties here. So they can be either removed completely, they don't have to be here, or they can be there, but basically they are not set. So as you can see here, we have the date property here at least, or start or end date, but these don't have anything. So we render them here, and they act as your personal archive or basically inbox where you can stash events you want to use. So you can search through it And now the cool part is that you can move events from the untracked, stash, or inbox into the calendar and back and forth. So as you can see now we show categories and we render the coloring of the events. So you can easily set up to-do list here or inbox of events you want to do someday, and then you can just drag and drop them. And this is fully undoable. All these operations are fully undoable, also redoable. So this is basically your third view and the third mode. So you can still see and work with events where you are not sure and you don't have a deadline yet. So you don't know where to put them. You want to do them someday. You can also create events through this module. So I want to... You can see the properties, the times properties are not being set. But we track it, and then one day you know, okay, I'm going to do it this Friday, you can just set it there. Now to finish explaining notification settings, so going one by one, you can disable them. You can toggle whether you want to play a sound. This depends on your operating system whether this will work, and then you can skip newly created events, which means that by default when you create an event, for now, you immediately get notified, but with this logic, we detect that, okay, this event was just now created, it would not make sense to notify. You may want it. Then there is snooze duration in minutes. So when you trigger a notification, let's actually show it by enabling them. So you can configure the default snooze duration. In 13 minutes, we are going to get notified around focus session. So we can snooze this, and now the minutes before is going to show when we are going to get notified. So in 13 minutes, the event is going to start, and by default, we have it set for 15 minutes to get notified before 15 minutes. So once we snooze it, we move the notification 15 minutes later. So now we are going to get notified 1.5 minutes after the event starts, because we got notified 13 minutes before the event began, and then we snoozed it. So this basically displays how many minutes before you should be notified around the event. And this is basically override option, where by default it's not needed there because it's explicitly set. But this is basically the override option that you specify. So we already talked about this at the start, where basically minutes before is override option of the global value. And what snoozing does, it just moves this configuration to later, so that you get notified later. So and then you, okay, so this was the default value for timed events and default value to get notified how many days before for all the events. Now let's explain event groups. So Prisma tracks events across 3 series. Recurring events. So basically we call these chain of events that are tracked together as series. So we have recurring event series, name series, and category series. So recurring events, we already went through it. They are connected by role ID. You can configure by default how many future events to generate, and then you can configure whether you want to propagate Frontmatter to instances or whether to ask before propagating. These two are mutually exclusive, and the difference is that ask before propagating is going to show a modal asking you if you want to propagate this Frontmatter. So what does propagate Frontmatter to instances even mean? So you have the source recurring event. Let's show it here. So we have these two events. This is the source one, This is the physical one. If I have this configured, I can add a new property. It's going to be automatically propagated to every single physical instance connected to this through the ADUL ID. And the ask before propagating, the only difference is that this is not going to happen automatically. We will prompt you, so status to do. You are going to get notified, and you can choose whether you want to apply this. We also tell you how many instances this affects, and then you can basically propagate or not propagate. And this applies absolutely the same way across names and categories. So these are quite heavy because you can have a lot of events sharing names, and whenever any event with the same name changes, we will propagate it to all of them. So be careful with this one because basically any changes are going to get propagated. So I would use ask before propagating, and in most cases you don't want to do this actually. So yeah, I would use ask before propagating here and most of the time decline. Let's say I have this project B, for example, here. So what I could do is tab a new value, like for example, setting here project as key and value B, and this will propagate to all of the project B events. And same thing for categories, which can be used a bit more often, but still like it's not that deep of a connection, so maybe you don't want to propagate everything. You can also configure which properties to exclude from propagation. So these changes are not going to be applied, and this is shared between all of these propagations. So for example, if I change the archive property, which is my internal property, I don't want it to be propagated, so I have it excluded here. Then there is the option to configure the debouncing in milliseconds, which debouncing means is that how much time needs to pass before we start propagating the properties. And you should set this to like 1 to 2 seconds reasonably, or you can experiment it whatever you want to, but basically it means like after I write this change here, how much time has to pass before I start propagating it. And if you in that 1 second change the property again, we will refresh the timer. So basically there has to be that amount of milliseconds of inactivity. So this is useful because if you set it to like 100 milliseconds, once you type one letter, so if you wanted to, for example, type like productivity, if you were to just type P, we would immediately propagate P across all of the events, then R, and so on. So you want some reasonable debouncing defaults there. There is also the option to configure marking, which is basically using the same logic as icons of the recurring events so that you can distinguish them between the regular events. So marking the source as well as physical, and they have different values. As you can see here, let me zoom in more. So you can change the icon here for the source and the physicals. So you can see in your calendar which of these are actually recurring events and were generated compared to normal events. Next configurations are rules. First of all, event colors. So as you can see here, we color events differently because of their categories. We can disable this if you want it all of them to look the same. You can also enable to color events with up to 5 different colors if they would be colored that way. So for example, if I were to color these or assign all of the categories to this event, it would be colored all of these ways. So this is what this setting does. For example, only 2 or 3 colors. Then there is the option to basically show overflow color dots, which means here that right now we only show 3 colors. So we basically show in the bottom right the rest of the colors that did not fit. This can be very useful if you are using a lot of Prometer properties to filter. So you, for example, use categories, you differentiate the events by types or profession or area. You can configure coloring for all of these, and if you like it, you can make the events look like national flags, or you can configure the color dot at the bottom right, So you will still see at a glance about the properties this event has. You can also change the default color of events. So this event is the default color because it doesn't have any category. So here is where you are defining colors. And colors, basically, if you use only one or two, the plugin goes top down and applies the first rule that matches. So currently we only have categories here, but as I said, we could track anything and we can change the ordering here. We can remove colors. We can change the value here. So for example, for health, we can change it to be a darker shade. You can add new color rules here. You can only disable them if you want to keep them, but no longer want to apply them for now. You can just disable them. So, and adding new. And this uses the same filtering logic that we already showcased here. So this JavaScript, targeting properties with our custom syntax. So you can play around with properties and set up your own coloring taxonomy. Then was the event filtering. So this applies here again. This follows the JavaScript rules. And you can set up global filtering for events. So that, for example, for me, so events that I have set as archived are not going to be rendered at all in the calendar. They're just going to be ignored completely from the start. So this is basically just hides them. This only filters them in the current view, but you can clear it up. But this is basically applied always. That's the difference. And you can use chaining here with AND logic or logic. So you can basically write whatever you want to. It can be a very complex expression and it's still going to work. The same applies for untracked events. So this is for tracked events, so timed and all day, and this is for untracked events. And here are the filter presets that we have already showcased. Again, you can create new ones, you can delete them, and work with them however you want to. And these are rendered here. So categories are very important, and they get a separate tab in the plugin. As we already explained, and it's written here, that categories are basically detected based on what values you are assigning. And then they are rendered here, so you can easily reuse the existing categories. So as you start using the plugin, you build up your own taxonomy of how you are, or name system of the categories, and you can work with it. So we display all of the events here, how it's structured in terms of how many times and how many all-day events you have. We render a pie chart here showing all of the categories. And you see breakdown of each category of how many events it contains and statistics. When you click on it, you can render a basis view, which basically targets all of the events that have this category. So you can see it and you can render whatever view you want to here. You can also rename the category, and the plugin is going to go through all of the events and rename the name. So if I learning, I could change to learn. This is quite a complex operation because it's going to rename 640 events, and you should restart plugin after doing this because it's a very long operation. So now, as you can see, the changes were applied and we rename it. You can also delete the category. So, for example, deleting the budget. Again, restart is required of Obsidian so that it applies correctly. So as you can see, budget was deleted here. Next, we have the option to automatically assign categories when they match the category name. So for example, if I select health as a name, you can see it got automatically assigned. So when I create it, this is just a convenient way to automatically track category, so you don't have to click it up and set it up. So if you are creating a lot of events, you might consider naming your events after the categories. And this works for either exact name match or substring match. So if this other option is configured as well, you can see I mentioned the health, so it got assigned. Or there's also the option, which this is a premium feature, to customize category assignment presets, which means that you can create your own configuration for names which should get auto-assigned categories. So basically, if you decide how you're going to name your events and you build up your own structure, for example, if you're going to the gym or sauna or walking or running, you can say that, okay, this is health. So now when I create gym, it gets automatically assigned health. So you can build up everything here. And this also works with substring matching. So if I say, this also gets assigned. Sorry, you can see it. So yeah. And this basically works in a way that you write the event names and then you assign the categories. Obviously, you can assign multiple ones. And you can then delete them. Or you can remove the entire preset. And this matches both lowercase and uppercase. And again, if you enable this as well, it's going to match substring. So you can just write all of the events you want and then what category should be assigned. And so you split them up based on commas. So each of these are event names. Now, in terms of Obsidian bases, we have this setting here to determine what default view to apply. So when I click the categories, we before used cards view, now we use table view. And you can change it. And also you may notice that we are showing status, priority, goal, backlink, tasks, and work here, which is what we have configured here. So you can write whatever properties you want, and you're going to see them in the basis view. And we also offer basis view here, which is the hotkey to show current interval in basis. So basically, we can see all of the events we are seeing here as a basis view. And so again, this uses the same display properties and work with the defaults that you configure. Next, specific settings. So Prisma Calendar supports template reintegration. If you specify the template path here, and so for example, I have this event specified here, but the reason it wasn't applied yet is because template plugin was not enabled. But if I enable it here and create a new event, you can see here it uses the template properties. And then obviously also Prisma adds its own properties on top of it. Basically, Prisma lets templater do its job and then it overrides the properties that it needs to. We also support changing locale. So you can see here this is mostly useful for the endianity of the headers and basically how we display the days here. In the future, I may consider adding full local support for every setting. So then the option to show ribbon icon, and we already showed it's this one here. Then keyboard navigation, basically in the calendar view, you can press left, right keyboards to navigate in intervals. You can disable that if you don't like it. Auto assigning Zettel ID. So if I create an event inside the task folder right here, it doesn't use this Prisma internal Zettel ID property. So, but however, if I were to configure this to all, what's going to happen is that now when I create a new event, You can see Prisma automatically assigned Zettel ID there. So if you want Prisma to use Zettel IDs for all of the events, so basically it's going to just pick it up whenever I create a new event in the folder Prisma is configured for, it's going to auto assign Zettel IDs. And you can only do this for calendar events or all events. There is also read-only mode, which read-only mode means that Prisma is not going to do any automatic actions. So this is event generation of recurring events, notifications, or for example, marking past events as done. Or any operation that you configure Prisma to do automatically is not going to do this. Because it's going to be read-only, and only manual actions that you as a user trigger are going to be applied. And why is this setting here? So if you are, for example, using Git to synchronize your Obsidian wall between devices, if you didn't enable it, what you should do is you should determine one device to be the writer and the rest should be readers. So you should make one device the main one to not be read-only, and you should configure the rest of the devices to be read-only. Because if you didn't do this, if you were to open a Prisma calendar on multiple devices, the recurring events would be generated in all of them, and since they won't be precisely the same way because Zettel IDs are unique, you're going to get conflicts. So that's why this setting is here. And if you are using Git, this setting is not stored inside the settings JSON of the plugin. So this means that this is intentional. It's stored in sync.json file, which you should put into your git ignore. So this way your settings are still being synchronized, but this particular option of read only is not going to be synchronized across devices because you don't want to synchronize it, because again, you want one device to be the writer and the rest the reader. So you don't want to synchronize this everywhere. Then default duration of events in minutes. So when I create an event, how big duration is going to be applied, how long. As you can see, it was 90 now. If you want to see the duration field in the event model, so this is this option here. Marking past events as done. So I kind of already mentioned this, but basically the plugin will periodically go and take the status property and done value and set it to all of the past events. So you can see here, the status is set to done. So the plugin will periodically go and it looks at all the events that are already in the past and they are going to be marked as done. So this is useful if you are basically accessing your nodes through other scripts or, for example, Obsidian bases. You can, for example, filter based on the done value, so you can see all of the events that were in the past. Or, for example, if you were to reflect on your weekend, you could configure the entire folder and then configure the event with the done value, and you will see all of the events that you have accomplished this week. The title Autocomplete, which basically you might have already noticed, but for example, when I write help, we are first of all going to suggest all of the category names, but then events with names that already exist. So for example, planning is very popular, so the plugin is going to show it, and I can accept it by pressing tab. It's going to basically autofill it. So it shows a ghost text of the most likely and most popular option. So you can just fill it with that, or you can navigate, and by pressing enter, we are going to select that one. So pressing tab uses the auto ghost suggestion, and enter uses the option you want to. You can also disable the entire time tracking. So if you don't use it and it's just polluting your view, you can remove that. You can also remove just the continue button from time tracking if it's bothering you for some reason, because again, everything is configurable. Then statistics. So the plugin shows statistics, and I will get to the views in a second, but so you can configure whether statistics should be showing decimal hours or so either decimal or formatted as minutes. So this is a matter of personal preference, whether you want to see 2.8 or you want to see 245 minutes. Then you can also configure the default grouping mode, because statistics offer two options of grouping. So it's either applied by category or by event names. This applies to statistics here, as well as in this daily stats view. So by default, if you set it to group by category, it's going to group events by category. So it's going to show you the duration you have spent on these events there, or you can use event names. And lastly, here are event presets, which, for example, if you have some specific event and you repeat a lot, with not just category, because you can configure category to be auto-applied, but for example, you can also specify the location, the specific icon, and additional properties here. Now you can save it as a preset here. For example, name it work. And what's going to happen is whenever now you are creating a new event or even editing an existing one. So for example, we have planning here, and you're going to edit it. You can apply the work preset. I should have maybe named it workshop, but you save it and it's going to apply this. So you can see we applied hello world, location, office. So you can easily edit events this way, but also when you are creating, obviously you can just fill it's going to fill the value here. You can also change the value. So if you no longer use office, or you can change the icon to something like this, you can override it. So you can either create a new preset or override the existing one and also rename it this way. So this got applied, and you can also see it in the settings here. So you can delete the preset here. We offer some basic specifications about the presets. And you can also specify if you want to apply some preset as a default value for some reason. We are just going to apply it for you. You can also clear the model here if you want to. So these are presets, and by default you can configure 2 presets. Also, one more thing here is that there is this minimize button. So let's say I will rename this to workshop event, for example. I can minimize it, and now I can restore the minimize model, and I will preserve the form data. So you can, as you may have remembered, when we are using tracking, so when we trigger stopwatch, it gets minimized and the stopwatch is running in the background. So this works with stopwatch. So the model is minimized, the clock is still ticking, it's tracking your time, and also the form value is obviously saved that way as well. Or if you are not tracking, you can also just trigger minimization here. So it's going to preserve all the data. And now we have deleted it because we have opened a new one. You may have noticed the license key option here. That's because Prisma follows a freemium pricing model. However, every single feature apart from category name presets that I have showcased so far is completely free. So Prisma Calendar is a free to use plugin. You don't need to provide any payment card informations or create an account. You just download, install the plugin, and start using it. Once you see and appreciate the value this plugin gives you for free, you may consider upgrading to the Pro version that unlocks additional advanced features. This is the page that breaks it down that I'm going to link below. And by using this page, you are able to start a free 30 days trial. So the free plan gives you recurring events, undo, redo, batch operation, multiple views, header actions, statistics, color rules, filtering, notifications, holidays, and locals that I'm going to show later, and a lot of other features. The Pro version gives you Gantt view to see dependencies between your events, Heatmap view, AI chat panel that allows you to manipulate your events through an AI interface, a dashboard view, which is a full-page analytics, the ability to embed Prisma calendar as Obsidian basis view into any node, CalDAV and ICS URL synchronization, which basically allows you to synchronize any external calendars like Google Calendar, Apple Calendar, or Outlook into your Obsidian Vault. Also unlimited calendar and preset, because the free version allows up to 3 calendars and up to 2 event presets. So the auto assign category presets and also priority support. And also by purchasing the license, you allow me to spend my time maintaining and continuously improving the plugin for everyone. So here is the breakdown. Again, the free version is going to be free forever. And the Pro version starts at $3 a month with a free 30 days trial. So you can just test it out and you won't pay anything. Over time, I plan to add more and more features to the Pro version, so you're going to gain even more value. Next are integrations. So the free plan allows you to use ICS Import and Export, so you can still achieve integrations with external providers for free. And you can do this by exporting the calendar, for example. You can first of all configure to which folder the exported ICS file should be saved in. And now let's, for example, export this calendar. You select your local time zone so that the events are accurate in your external provider, and you export them. Then an ICS file is going to be created, and you can just go ahead and import it in the external provider, and it's going to create all of the events for you. Let's actually show this by doing a round trip. So this is the Prisma main calendar, and I also have this another calendar here that is specified in the directory test. So the directory is empty, and when I open this calendar, there is nothing here. So I'm going to import this calendar here from the value that I just exported. So if I go ahead and actually select the value and I configure the second calendar as the one to which we should import, I select the correct time zone and I import this. So we have finished importing, and as you can see, this calendar has exactly the same events as this one. They just don't use coloring, because I'm going to explain it in a second. They are isolated, but so these are actually separate, completely separate events in different directories. Here you can see test. So then there is the option to use CalDAV synchronization with external providers by adding an account, and then you can configure whether you want to auto-synchronize notifications, whether you want to synchronize on startup, and this is periodic and this is on startup. And then you can also specify a different color for integrated events. So, and the same thing applies to ICS URL. Both of these are read-only right now. In the future, I may add a two-way synchronization. So the same thing, and you just add a provider here. So let's actually show this with a fast mail provider here. As an example, I have a Nextcloud self-hosted service here, so I will create a new event in this range, and then just configure the CalDAV integration here. So we will add a new CalDAV integration. We specify the URL. You name the calendar. Then this is basically how often it should periodically synchronize itself. You configure the time zone the calendar is set. You can also configure an icon. You want all of the events that are from this integration to be rendered as. Then obviously you specify the username and password. Then we detect all of the calendars you have there, so you can configure which ones you want to synchronize. And then you just save it and you synchronize it. So as you can see, here we have the new event. And also example event here. And we can see that they contain the C icon that we have specified here. So you can edit icons, time zones, intervals, name, and you can also disable the calendar to basically temporarily turn it off. You can also refresh the calendars to add more. So as part of this account, I can include if you create new calendars, or you can basically change which calendars are synchronized from there as well. And absolutely the same thing applies here for ICS URL. So you specify the name, interval, and you specify the ICS URL here. And I can also show you that these integrations, by default, it's not enabled, but I can override it to use custom colors. So the integrations will use specific coloring. That's going to take priority. So you can distinguish with icons and also by colors which events are imported as part of an integration. Prisma also supports showing holidays. So if you enable it, you can configure it to show holidays in your country. So for example, Czech Republic. As you can see here, these are holiday events that are not real events. They are marked with a specific sign that they are holidays. And you can specify certain specific features like holiday types or region or state provinces, for example. Let's actually quickly show also US. As you can see, the last settings are AI settings, where you can first of all specify API keys for Anthropic or OpenAI that we are going to leverage. Then you can specify the model we are going to use. So we support Opus, Sonnet, Haiku, and GPT. For most tasks, Sonnet is very good, and Haiku is maybe sufficient as well if you're not doing anything complex. You should experiment and see for yourself. Then the options here are event manipulation. So when the AI is manipulating events, you can configure whether all of the operations the AI is going to execute are going to be wrapped as one single batch operation, so that you can undo it or redo it as a one operation. So basically, if you tell AI to remove, for example, the exercise events, it's going to remove all of the 5. So then, if it's packed as one batch, you can undo everything and see it that way, or you can make it individual. Then also, if you whether you want to ask for confirmation before execution, since we support undo redo, this is not a very scary thing to let AI do because you can undo it, but still you can prefer to have a confirm dialog before whatever you tell AI to do, it's going to execute it. Then when you are planning, so this is for manipulation and also planning operations. And I'm going to explain it in a second. And then planning, so whether you want AI to be prompted and told when you are using the planning mode, we can basically prompt and validate that the AI plans events so that there are no gaps between them. So that means that when you're planning events, that they're going to be consecutively created, so that one event finishes and another starts. And then also day coverage, whether we should tell the AI to create events for every single day. Also custom prompts, so you can specify custom context that we are going to pass in as a prompt to the AI, so we can explain things. If you repeat these prompts a lot, you should encapsulate them as a context prompt here, and it's going to be included here, so you can edit it, you can work with it, add new ones, and delete them. Now you can enable the AI by clicking this button here, or by using the OpenAI chat option. So there are 3 modes: query, manipulate, and plan. As you can see here now, there is this custom prompt option, and the AI features are going to be improved over time through trial and error, and I'm going to fully explore the potential. But query mode is basically read-only, where you ask the AI about the current events you see in View. So if it's daily, weekly, or monthly, we are going to pass every single event you see here as context to the AI, so you can ask him about your week or month. So you can ask him, as you can see, he's going to respond. So you can chat with your own notes. Then there is the manipulate option, which basically gives the same context here, and you can tell the AI to remove certain events. And also each conversation is persisted as a separate one, so you can access it and you can continue the conversation, and we are going to provide it as context. So this is classical way of how ChatGPT works. You can search through conversations, and we basically prompt the AI to name the conversation somehow so that it's memorable. You can even change the modes throughout the conversations. And here is the new prompt option context that we specify here that can be provided. So let's show manipulate, where as you can see, we are getting prompted for confirmation. And it's executed. And you can undo or redo these operations as well, as you would normal events. Prisma supports multiple calendars, and the free version includes up to 3. And a calendar does not mean just this calendar view. It means an entire configuration of a full workflow. It's basically a separate vault nearly. Like this is the same comparison towards having multiple vaults in Obsidian. This is what multiple calendars are in Prisma Calendar. And because basically each calendar has fully separate settings. So you already saw here, this calendar 2 has a separate folder. It can have a separate template path. All of these configurations are going to be separate to this calendar. So you can use different properties in different calendars. So if you have if you have multiple folders with time data, in one of them you may be using completely different properties. You can create multiple calendars in Prisma and have it adjust itself to match your workflow preferences. So you will be able to visualize and see everything, all of the display properties, names, the entire calendar values. So the calendar can look entirely different. You can change every color, every setting to be completely different as well here. You can also choose which buttons you want to see on every separate calendar. Also coloring, so filtering, this is a very important one, where you can also, what you can do is point the same calendar to the same directory and use different filtering and different colors. So you can see the same calendar, or so you can see the same folder from a completely different view and completely different filtering. So you will be able to see, you can use different colors, different filters, different presets. You can also see different properties inside the display properties section. So you can customize this and literally have separate vaults of files, and this applies to all of the views. So each of these views is also isolated and separated to it's scoped to this calendar. So as you can see, these two views are also scoped. So the entire thing, it's not just the calendar, all of the views are scoped to the folder and directory. So categories, bases, and also, yeah, integrations. So you can navigate and choose between calendars here. You can specify basically which calendar you are currently editing inside settings. You can create a new calendar here. You can also rename existing calendars. So you can name them however you want to. You can also clone calendars. So if you want to basically not, because when you use create new, we are going to use the default settings for the new calendar. As you can see here, for example, the new calendar, it uses all of these properties. So if you have something configured and you want to duplicate it and change just certain things, you can also use the clone current view, and then obviously you can delete calendars. And when you delete and create new calendars, it's better to restart the plugin, especially if the calendars can conflict with each other. So if they're in the same directories. Or another thing to note is that configuring calendars in the same directory or subdirectory with different properties won't work, because the plugin, the calendars are going to fight each other. So you should be using calendars with either completely isolated separate folders as vaults, or B, you can point the calendar to the absolutely same folder with the same properties, but different configuration, like in terms of the visuals, so settings, colors, and filters. You can change that, but don't have the same folder and different properties. The last thing to show inside this calendar tab is that basically we support weekly, monthly, daily, and list view here. So we're mostly inside the weekly view, but to the monthly with the color dots here. So you can basically just navigate also with the keyboard shortcuts left and right and just see the intervals, and also daily. There is also a list view which renders the events as a list, and you can also see the display properties and colors here. Now let's go over the next tab. So the first one is daily plus stance, where basically we just render a pie chart on the right side, and on the left side we show a daily view of the calendar where you can navigate it, and it's going to render the statistics of that particular day. So this is very good for reflection and breakdown. You can see the particular day and analyze how you're spending your time with both categories and event names as groups. Then there is a dual daily view, which basically renders two daily calendars that are isolated. So you can compare how you're spending time certain days. So you can see and where your time is going, and you can do a reflection of how I spent my week last week compared to the week 2 weeks ago, for example. Then there is the Heatmap view, which basically renders a heat map. And we show the density based on the darker the color, the more events you have that day. So you can see how you're spending your time. We also support navigation, and we render all of the events here. So this supports the display properties that we have showcased there. So this also renders display properties, and you can navigate with keyboard across the events to see how you're spending your time. So you can see at what days you're doing a lot of work. So this is good for reflection and also planning. And this supports also a monthly view with the same navigation and absolutely the same logic. Next, we are going to show the timeline view, which loads lazily. So as you're scrolling, we fetch new items and we load them. So you can see how you're spending your time here as well. It also offers navigation to go to today or to a specific interval in time. So this is another way to look at your vault, in conjunction with the calendar view, Heatmap view, and also a Gantt view. We also show here a label, and clicking on it shows the preview model. And over time, I'm going to add more features to the timeline view as well, because basically the calendar view is the most feature-rich one because it has been there since the initial release of the plugin, and these other views are quite new. So if you have any feedback, share it, and I'm going to polish this view over time as well. Next, there is dashboard, which basically gives you detailed statistics of your by name, category, or recurring events. So you can see here a pie chart of all your names, total events, and average per series, with also a table here where you can filter by name and sort it. Here also we're going to add more features over time. This is a new view that I'm still experimenting with, and I'm going to add detailed analytics here with a lot of new features that you can look forward towards. I have a lot of ideas about this view, and I think there is a lot of potential here to make these something along the lines of a project tracker as well. So then there is the category view where we render pie chart of the categories with statistics here, and again, a similar view here. And also recurring events, where we don't have a lot of recurring events right now, but you can see the type, filter through it, and see everything. And this is actually how the model looks here. The last view is Gantt view, which basically renders dependencies between events. And this uses the prerequisites property. This view is very new, and over time I'm going to polish it, but this is just an experiment. And again, over time it's going to be better and better. Clicking it showcases the preview of the event, and you can see the connections through arrows. So this is tied to the prerequisites property. You can see here, the focus session has the skill building prerequisites property. So that's what's integrated with it. And we also have a feature that's called toggle prerequisite connections, where the plugin is going to render arrows that showcase connections. So basically this is like a inline Gantt view right inside your calendar. So you can see the arrows to see dependencies between your tasks based on the prerequisites property. So again, it's based on the prerequisites property here. You can also change the colors of the arrows. And you can also change the size of the lines on arrowheads as well. So you can configure this however you like it. So you can literally see, like, you can do project management with Prisma Calendar to plan out dependencies and see the connections between your tasks. So these tabs can be managed here and configured however you want to. So you can change the ordering of the tabs, and the first one is going to be shown by default. You can change the name. So for example, if you don't like timeline, you can hide it. You can rename this to daily stats. It's going to be reflected here. You can change the ordering. And this also applies for sub-tabs here. You can change the ordering within them and rename them. Do whatever you want with them. And this is persisted. So that means that once you close the Obsidian and start it again, it's going to be synchronized. This is part of the settings JSON. So this is also going to be synchronized across your devices if you configure it that way. You can also hide the settings button, because this can be opened with a hotkey as well. Manage tabs. So you can hide that button if you don't like it. Now let's go through these page header at the top right, which basically just renders buttons to trigger any commands that Prisma Calendar exposes. So first of all, toggle prerequisites. Then we have also options to show recurring events through this. The option to create event with Stopwatch, which basically just, we go here, we just start a new event with the stopwatch already running. So you can just start time tracking and you can do focus session, and it's already running, it's created. Then you can use the other feature here to restore minimize module and see it running. We have the option to show skipped events. Now, next are the statistics. So this one is to show daily statistics, where we render a pie chart and module with also a table button. We show the capacity tracking with the boundaries of your events, total hours. You can configure whether you want to include or skip the skipped events, then grouping by event, either event name or categories. You can navigate to today, and this is also allows you to quickly toggle between months. Also, this is 10 days. This is 10 days and this is 1 day. You can also hide the chart and see distribution. The same thing applies to weekly statistics, monthly, and we also support all-time statistics, so you can see the complete time you have spent based on categories or event names. Then we have the option to highlight uncategorized events, so you can see which events don't have a category if you are not using the color rules, and this also applies to categories as well, so you can highlight it. Then an important one is undo and redo, so we already use this. You can undo or redo, and the important thing to realize is that these buttons just are there so you can just click them instead of relying on the Obsidian commands that Prisma Calendar uses and exposes. So you can configure hotkeys and trigger them through hotkeys, so your own custom shortcuts, or manually writing in here. So you can either use shortcuts, write it out here to undo, or you can use the buttons. So you have full flexibility. Then there was the restore minimize module. So if we have a forum or we have a running stopwatch feature, then the open AI chat feature, which basically toggles AI here. Then we have also today statistics, which is similar to daily, but daily basically opens the current day's interval, and today it's open always today. So if you are looking at a certain interval and you don't want to go back, but you want to see daily, you can use that button. And there is the option to show the current interval in basis, which we already showcased. So this adjusts itself and it shows you all of the events. Then we have the option to navigate back, which is useful if you are using recurring events. Let me show it here. So for example, so we have a new recurring event here. And if we go to source, it's going to highlight it and showcase it here. But then we are not able to easily go back. We can use the navigate back button to basically go backwards from there. So we can go quickly to the past to see the source original recurring event and then navigate backwards. We also expose the go to today button, which is the same button as this one here. Scroll to now the same button as this one. Then we have also global event search, where you can search through all of your events. You can specify only recurring ones or skip them, only all-day events, only timed events or both, only skipped events or non-skip events. You will see all of this information here. You can search through names and then navigate there. Then you can go backwards. So you can also open the event by just clicking on it. It will open the actual event here. We have also the option to show filtered events, which is basically the same button that's being rendered here. These week statistics and these month statistics, which are the same thing but in the current interval. Also the button to create untracked event, which is the same thing as clicking here. And also create event, which is the same button as clicking here. So basically, if you don't want these buttons because they are too big and you want focus session, you can remove the button here, for example, and now and today, and you can use this one instead. You have also the button to toggle batch selection here. And all of these buttons are fully flexible and configurable. Very similarly to the tab management, you can change ordering of the buttons. You can see here, I have changed it, so now it's show recurring. You can hide buttons you don't like, which you should do, and just remove the ones that are useless to you. And you can then change the ordering. You can also hide this show settings button here because it's the same button to manage their actions. It's the same thing. You can also edit the names, edit the icon, and edit the colors. So for example, highlight cut uncategorized, I can change it to alarm check and use it the red color and just name it highlight if I wanted to. So you can customize this entire section at the top right exactly how you want it. So all of the buttons are represented by hotkeys, which you can assign shortcuts to. And some hotkeys I didn't show yet are, for example, the option when you have an event here. So right now we automatically assign Zettel IDs, but if we didn't, what we can now use from Prisma Calendar is we can edit the current notice event, so we can assign property and like dates. For example, I can assign start date or end date, so I can turn this task node into an event on the Prisma Calendar's timeline and assign all of these things here. You can also unsettle it to the current node. That's also representable. It's also possible. Also, there is the option to trigger current event stopwatch. This is basically a shortcut where once I trigger this, you can see that the new task is already being tracked on the timeline. So, and then I can use the restore module and I see. So basically, if I have existing nodes in the folder, there are not yet events and I want to start using them, I can just trigger stopwatch over them. We also offer the shortcuts to basically go to a specific view. And this is indexing, so you have to have it like this, and then you will go to the second index. I want to also quickly mention the Programmatic API, which allows you to script the calendar. So what this allows you to do is, for example, create an event programmatically. So as you can see here, I have created a team meeting and it's rendered here. So any plugin or any script, or for example, templater script or your own custom script can access the Prisma API. And you can do anything that you would do manually with Prisma's API now programmatically. So you can script your entire workflows, and the aim and goal is, and I think it's already there, but I may have missed out something, is to make Prisma fully scriptable. So every action and every command is scriptable and you can trigger it with the API as well. So another example is, for example, statistics, where you can see the statistics of your current day, where we will show you all of the events, entries, when you started, when you finished, the total duration you have spent, so you can access your Prisma calendar programmatically and see your statistics. And the way I, for example, use this is I have a separate plugin that towards the end of the day calls the Prisma statistics endpoint so that I see how I have spent my time. And what I then do is I generate a PDF report of my entire day and I sync it to my Remarkable. So this way I can, at the end of my day, I can reflect over what I have done and I can see as a PDF literally every event and the entire day broken down on how I have spent my time. So since I'm using Stopwatch to track my time, I see precisely how I have spent my time. So that's one of the use cases. The last thing I want to show is that, as I have already hinted, Prisma Calendar supports embedding its calendar view as a layout inside Obsidian bases. So what you do is you just configure this as a layout, then you select the calendar, you can select a specific view, and also initial date to basically embed and configure as. So this supports searching, so you can basically configure searching here. Also filtering, so what you can do here is, for example, add category contains other, and we are going to render only other properties. So you can embed this into your own nodes and configure specific views. So you can programmatically generate views of Prisma Calendar, first of all, but you can just, for specific workflows, create a new node called Prisma Other View with a specific weekly view and date configuration, and you can just see it inside your own node. So this has a lot of potential, and this is a very early feature in its early phase that I'm going to progressively improve over time because it still has some bugs and it's not perfect. I want to add more features to it so that it's closer to the original calendar view. But currently it supports batch select and also navigation and untracked events. And the way it works is currently it basically inherits the settings based on which calendar you specify here. So the properties, display properties, and the calendar configuration is being inherited based on which calendar you select here. Over time, I plan to add more views like timeline, heatmap, and Gantt. So you have a lot of things to look forward to. So this concludes the full features breakdown encyclopedia video. Hopefully I have covered everything because there are a lot of things, so I may have missed something. If something still remains unclear to you, don't hesitate to comment down below or create a GitHub issue and I will address everything one by one. The goal here is to make Prisma the best calendar application on the planet. So that is the go-to no-brainer calendar for people who want to take control of their time and have power over how their events are visualized, have the full freedom and flexibility to have an application that adapts to you, not the other way around, while also remaining fully private. To that end, feedback is absolutely crucial for me. So if you see any bugs, please don't hesitate to create a GitHub issue and I will try to address it as soon as possible. I use this plugin daily and fix whatever issues and bugs I encounter as soon as possible. I have caught quite a lot, but they still keep coming. So if you see anything, please create a GitHub issue. Also, if you have any ideas on how to improve this plugin, so any new potential features, please create a GitHub issue as well, and I will consider adding it. Because the goal is to make this plugin perfect, without any bugs, fully performant, and as feature-rich as possible. So thank you for watching. Go give Prisma Calendar a try, and I will see you in the next video.